Therapists Talk Wayward. Today we are talking about episode 6, Mirror. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are recording the day after the GLAAD Award nominations, and Wayward has been nominated for Outstanding Limited or Anthology Series. What? Shout out, Wayward.
Yes.
By the time this airs, probably the GLAAD Awards will have already happened. So Wayward will have already won. So just congratulations, Mae Martin. That was wonderful. And Handsome has also been nominated for Outstanding Podcast. And if you don't listen to Handsome, in addition to Queer Therapists Talk Wayward, you should listen to Handsome, which is Mae Martin, Tig Notaro, and Fortune Feimster. And we're all fans, like all of us. Huge fans. And it is like the light that we all need right now in these very dark times. And shout out to Tig Notaro, whose documentary Come See Me in the Good Light is also nominated. And I'm sure everybody won. Have you seen Come See Me in the Good Light yet? I haven't watched it yet.
But yeah, I've watched parts of it. Bobbi watched it at a whole queer watch party.
It was not just a queer watch party. It was a Scorpio's birthday party. I mean, how perfect is that?
That's
a whole room full of queers just like sobbing and in their feelings. Like, happy birthday, Scorpio.
Oh my God, that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, this is a great segue. Avery, do you want to welcome in our guest?
Yes, I do. I want to welcome in my friend and inspiration, Bobbi Rose, LMFT. Bobbi, I don't want to try to speak to your practice. I can only say you're just an amazing, delightful person, and I'm so grateful to have you in my life. But do you want to tell us a little bit about your therapy practice, your interest in Wayward, anything that brings you here to talk to us?
I am, first of all, absolutely thrilled to be a part of this. Avery and I first made the connection that we had been watching Wayward while we were walking through a corn maze with several of our friends, both trying to just let other people take the lead there. And it felt like a perfect kind of weird liminal space to be talking about Wayward podcast. Instead of tall pines, it was tall corn stalks. But as soon as I heard about this podcast, I just got so excited to listen to it because I've been geeking out so much on the show and wanting to break it down. And there's just so much content here. There's so much like psychological, fascinating things happening. So I'm also a really huge fan of Mae Martin and have a very big crush on you, Mae, and am really, really proud of this show and the representation. And this feels so important to have this queer therapist talking about Wayward. When you listen to this, Mae, as has been said before, we are ready to be friends. And anytime you want to come on the pod or, break it down or visit Sonoma County or the Bay Area, we are here and ready. And as far as my practice goes, I was a troubled teen myself and a survivor and came from a very troubled, dysfunctional family. As a young person, actually at age 12, I really started to seek therapy. I wanted therapy for myself. And I've always had that introspective, external processing kind of nature. I struggled so hard to find an adult who could meet me and reflect me in a way that felt authentic and felt safe. I went through several different therapists. I found some that were kind of okay, and I met with some who actually were harmful. And it really impacted me in a big way and motivated me to become a therapist, and even more so a therapist for gender queer, gender expansive trans youth, because there are so few of us who are in the community and reflecting that identity who are therapists and who can hold that kind of space and attune to teenagers. And I really love, as Avery said in the first episode, which is the only one I've heard so far, you talked about how incredible it is to work with teenagers and how our society is so pathologizing of teenagers. And my experience with teens and adolescents is that they are so deeply introspective and curious about their own experience and really truth speakers and able to call out a lot of the hypocrisy that they see in our society and in the adult relationships and in their families, which, you know, oftentimes the family is using them as the identified patient and saying, like, you're the problem in this system. And as those of us who, you know, remember our teen years very vividly and remember what that was like to be pathologized and be pointed out as the problem, that's really not the case. And it's just, it's powerful work. It's generative work. It's not easy. You're working with the family system in a way that you're not working with the family system with adults. Of course, it's present, but it's different. This show just deeply resonated with both my own lived experience, with many of my friends, with my siblings, with how vulnerable teens are. They really have a deep desire to belong. They also have the need to tell the truth and rebel and speak to the issues around them, and then get ostracized and pushed out and targeted as the problem. This show, I mean, the way that Mae has captured the vulnerability of these teens and, you know, some of the adults that take advantage of that vulnerability is profound. That's how I am passionate about Wayward and a little bit about my practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm aware this episode that we're talking about today, Mirror, has a lot of like what you don't do as a therapist to be a safe space for a teen client. So there's a lot of entry points, I think, in this episode in particular to talk about how to do all of the things they're doing very badly, you know, much, much better. And like what does it look like to work responsibly with teens? So sorry to hear that you encountered harm in your own experiences with therapists, though of course I know that's really common
Yeah.
for queer folks and folks of all kinds of marginalized identities. It can be really hard to find a person who just feels like a safe person, let alone a good therapist. Um, and the safe person part is the absolute foundation that we see is just completely lacking here in this, particularly in this episode. I'm thinking of the interaction between Evelyn and Lila, and also the setup of the, you know, the wilderness, get to the mountaintop first, kind of, you know, the whole thing is a kind of not how you do it. uh it's a heavy
Yes.
episode, as we were
It is a
talking about,
heavy
kind of
episode.
Yeah, we're
it's a
going to
heavy
try to keep
episode.
finding like little moments, glimmers of levity or moments of hopefulness within the episode, but
Yeah,
it's a really tricky one. And
yeah.
Bobbi, it's really nice to meet you. We're just meeting today, and I'm so glad that you're here. And thank you for sharing all what you did in your work. And you know, it's getting me thinking about mirroring in our practice. I kind of mentioned before, and just the importance of finding a queer slash trans therapist, even, and that mirroring of having somebody whose identities or social markers are similar to yours or are in alignment so that you can have that mirroring that so many of us don't have, that I didn't have when I was a young person. And that I think the three of us offer to our clients who are in those communities, and how just that in and of itself, our presence and our beings, whatever it is always that anyway, right? It's just you just be like, what is it like to be a therapist? You just are yourself, you know, like that's our who we are. The relational piece is the therapy. And I'm just thinking about that in terms of ways that mirroring, appropriate mirroring, Avery, to your point, like healthy mirroring, mirroring that is, you know, transformative and healing, what that can look like. And I'm just curious if both of you want to speak a little bit about like how you hold mirroring in your practices a bit more, and anything specific that comes up around that.
I think one of the things that drives me crazy about our profession, honestly, is that we use the same words often for multiple things, and mirroring is one of those. So I think, first to disambiguate, like there's mirroring in the very simple reflective sense of like, I'm going to say back to you what you said to me to make sure I'm understanding it, which can be really helpful and can be really healing for folks who felt really misunderstood, or folks who've been through processes like what Lila goes through, where their memories have been kind of toyed with and manipulated. So just like faithfully repeating back what somebody has said has uses. And then there's the other kind of mirroring that I think of that comes more from self psychology, which is more like honestly what other schools of thought call validation and even cheerleading, like the Kohut version of mirroring, which is like, that was so great what you did. And that has such a dramatic effect on self-esteem, you're a child, feels seen, feels like they're actually getting told that they're cherished and loved for something that feels authentic for them instead of just something that the parents want them to be. And those needs definitely show up in therapy where they haven't been met. And I think I I wrote a paper that'll probably never be published about it because I can't stand writing for academic journals, it turns out. But
Oh,
I wrote a
Avery,
paper.
where is this paper? I want this paper. What is
I,
this?
I wrote a paper about how mirroring the kind of like being seen and loved for who you are is so important for trans folks, in particular trans
Mm,
and queer folks. I feel
mm,
like
mm.
even if you have a parent who maybe does their best to see and support you and mirror you positively in some ways, if your gender is just not seeable, or if for whatever religious or paradigm reasons your parent doesn't want to or can't see that part of yourself, I do think that part will show up in therapy, often really needing to be mirrored. Like
Yes.
for my trans clients, when they start taking hormones or they start dressing in gender affirming ways, or they want to be seen in how cute they are, and
Totally.
how not just how cute they are to me, but how they're feeling cute, and
Mhm.
how I think there is a way in which I pretty simply just kind of join with that in my queer clients, knowing how important it is to be seen and cherished for your authentic self. And certainly, the other kind of layer with this Kohutian self psychology way of mirroring is to also help a client notice how much they need that themselves, and to feel into the grief that's there inside in the places where they didn't get enough of that. So it feels to me like a twofold process that I hold with my queer and trans clients in particular, but not only to both kind of just like join with the joy and enthusiasm as the queer self emerges, but also to really notice the grief that's there in the ways that part of themselves maybe hasn't gotten that attention before ever. Those are my casual thoughts on mirroring. Now you don't have to read
Beautiful.
my paper.
No, we all want to read your paper. How about for you, Bobbi? What comes up around mirroring?
In connection to this episode in particular, literally called Mirror, it's the mirror room, which I didn't remember until I rewatched it and made that connection of, oh, they call this room with the door and where she's saying the thing over and over and over again to them, and that it's this warped mirror. And that Evelyn uses this really manipulative technique to get these young people to land in their shame and their trauma so that she can have power over them. And then when I was thinking about how I use mirroring in my own practice, especially with my teen clients, it's always to help them feel empowered. It's to help them feel seen and validated, and also to reflect back to them that their biggest places of shame and fear and regret and like these really hard things to hold and let other people see actually have a place. And that as an adult, I can reflect back to them that they are still worthy of love and belonging and compassion. And to see how that can be manipulated in this episode is so intense. It's so uncomfortable. And as therapists, I think especially it just like, ooh, it just gets in this place of we have such a profound position in people's lives, and how we use the tools are we using it so that our clients can feel in this way of acceptance and of non-judgment and of unconditional positive regard? Even these are the places that they can't love in themselves and they can't accept in themselves. And then if you have someone like Evelyn who's actually using that to say, I want you to go in there and feel the shame, and I want you to feel the trauma, and I want you to feel the horror of the things you've done that have made you feel unworthy and unlovable. And now I'm going to insert myself as the only source of reprieve, that you now need to be reliant on me in order to feel okay. It's not about empowering them, right? It's about taking power and control to the adult self in order to control the teen.
Yeah, 100%. And in a previous episode, we talk about sort of like how that's folks with like extreme narcissism. Like this is the task to do that, to break them down, to find all of the really the deep wounds and then use them for their gain, right? Use them against them. And this is what Evelyn does again and again in this episode. We really see that happening. And I think that I love everything that you both just said. Thank you for speaking on this mirroring question. And a lot of folks who maybe are newer to therapy or haven't had therapy before think that some folks think that you go to therapy and you just go right to the trauma and you talk through the trauma and then you're done and you're healed. And I think that in this episode, really what Evelyn is trying to do is to get in there and to gain power, like you were saying, Bobbi. And it's not that in therapy we don't necessarily go to core wounds and go and talk about core traumas, but we do not do it like this, y'all.
Yeah.
No. Hard no. That's not, if that kind of thing is happening to you so fast, it is not trauma informed. This person doesn't know what they're doing. That's not what healing looks like. It's destabilizing. It creates fragmentation. It's no good.
It's no damn good.
It's no damn good. So we're not doing that. But are we potentially inviting our clients, and do I invite my clients into looking at their own mirror and their shadows and investigating that slowly over time,
That's right.
collaboratively in a strength-based way with lots of affirmations and all of those things. Potentially, yes, if that's what they want to do, for sure, but never like this and never. I just want to say that because I think there is this kind of sometimes a misconception that I hear from clients who haven't had experiences with therapy, and I think that's okay. It's okay to not know that. How would you know that? You would think, oh, here's my problem. Let me go talk about the problem and fix it. But it's just not how trauma works, and we can't do it like that. So yeah, I think it's just important to say that in terms of mirroring, it's about, going side by side, slowly along, mirroring all along the way, and being on the journey together to discover whatever we need to discover, including going through some of the shit like Lila has to do in this episode. It could include that, but never like this.
So correct.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that forward. Yep.
Yeah. I want to talk about, I think it feels important to talk about, especially since you said that, and it felt important to me in this episode to talk about like what is correct, like what we would do as we're not doing this. But I want to say one of the things that feels really important to me about this episode is that it really does show this way that things can be quite murky inside of us, in our psyche. And that is a space that is so sacred that I feel like as therapists, like we walk into that space of the unknown in someone's psyche, and it is so tender in there to not push it in a direction or superimpose what we think happened or what we think what happened means. All of that is just so delicate to stay out of, what Evelyn leans into, which is directing, like, oh, it went this way, give me the real memory. But that's so vulnerable for folks with trauma of any kind, maybe particularly childhood sexual abuse, but like much of childhood trauma is so fragmented and the memories are so squishy, and the good parts of the parents and the bad parts of the parents, like we see here in Lila's memory of her mother, that's all real and it's really complicated, and the childhood psyche is not expansive enough to hold all of it. So it really does, it gets confusing in there. Just to say, like, that's also a space that I feel like a lot of the gender expansive youth that I've worked with go through. Like, there's a real murkiness in it, in the process sometimes, not for everybody, but for some folks of like, I don't know, is my gender this? Is it that? Is it this today and then that tomorrow? Is that okay? I feel like there's this parallel that I was processing as I was watching it the second time of like thinking about both my work with trauma and my work with gender questions, where I just try to be like in that process with somebody where I can be felt, but not ever like try to move it in a direction. That's a really hard thing, I think, for new therapists and for most people, maybe to sustain, is just being with the unknown and the murkiness inside of ourselves. And it's a place that's, yeah, just to normalize. Anybody who's listening to this who has trauma or questions or murky places inside them, that's normal. And the person who rushes too quickly to get you to an answer is probably doing you no favors.
Totally. And that through the process of therapy, you might not actually come to clarity or answers. The unknowable things might stay that way because your psyche's doing its job of blocking it out to protect you. And maybe you were too young to have the consciousness to actually remember what happened. And sometimes that's upsetting and strange to not have all of the answers to point to. And at the same time, you might not need them in order to do the healing work that you need to do or want to do. And so I think that's also important to say. Like, we don't always come to the part where Evelyn points to and says, "See, this is what you did." It might just stay in that murkiness and that ambiguity, and that's okay too.
Avery, something that you just said really hit home with something parallel. The lie that is being projected on those of us who provide gender affirming care and work in particular with young people who are trans and gender expansive, that almost like we are acting as Evelyn did in this episode and influencing, and they use the term grooming,
Mm.
and that pathologizing and that absolute bold lie that gender affirming care for young people is about influencing them or pushing them in a direction, which actually gender affirming care is about. Your process is an organic process and it's going to shift and change, and you belong and you have every right to explore yourself and to feel like that is okay, and that's a beautiful natural process, and I would never interrupt that process or try to influence that process. And in fact, the opposite has always been true. What I tell all of the teens that I've worked with in groups, in school settings, in my private practice is change is the only constant in life. And I want to give you the blessing to explore, to find your authentic self in the iteration of what it feels like now, and that we're not in a rush, and that we don't need to run towards a binary thinking system. Like, you don't have to hurry a medical transition, and medical transition is not the only path. And that, to really allow the diversity, the truth of gender diversity and identity diversity to be the container, to be the safety. And so I just wanted to speak to that, because we have been presented as being like an Evelyn and trying to manipulate and mind control and push young people into our own agenda and our own idea of who they should be, or, I don't know, wanting more trans people in the world or whatever that falsehood is. And that actually gender affirming care is about caring for and appropriately and healthily mirroring and creating space for people to be accepted in their true authentic self that can change and will change over lifetime.
Yes, I love that. I so
Love it.
appreciate that correction of the way that we're often framed. It's so true. And it's so complicated. And it's hard because of the current climate, I think, for kids when they come to a gender affirming therapist to really trust the space, to trust that they can talk about their doubts and still receive support for the care that they need to get. And I really try to normalize, the doubts and the murkiness and the expansive explorative process with my clients, but they're often so worried to enter into that exploration because the atmosphere of stigma and oppression is so intense that it feels like if I say for 1 second I have a doubt, you're not going to write me my letter and I'm not going to get the care I need. And they're so, yeah, it's really tender to be in that with folks right now in an identity that feels so just hated and stigmatized. And to get them to actually be able to have the full expansive process is, yeah, is really a lot of work against the tide of transphobia that exists in life.
Which is why it's so important what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just acknowledging
absolutely.
that Mae Martin is someone who is non-binary and uses they them pronouns and is representing more of a binary transmasc character in this show as Alex, and also is, as a human being in the world, is occupying a gender expanded place where it's not the binary. And so,
Yes.
Mae, please join us in the conversation. I would love to hear Mae's take on this piece and like, what's happening in our country and around the world. And the false representations and lies being told about trans people, about gender expansive people, about that there only exists two genders, and that is defined by doctors or authorities who say this is what you are and that's it and that's all you can be, and all of the policing that happens in the world around what it means to be in those two boxes, an M or an F. It doesn't go fully into that in this show, but it's written by someone who lives that every day.
I mean, what's happening in this episode for me is that Evelyn is brainwashing Lila. And it starts with this very, it's this very clockwork orangey moment of, sitting in front of the door and her eyes are sort of bloodshot and she's just like being in this trance. We don't really know. I mean, it kind of has there's these like kind of fun, almost fantastical, ethereal moments that the show has where it's like, what is the toad? What are they we don't really know what they're taking. There's these like funny, like we don't exactly know what's exactly going on. And I think this is one of them. I mean, there's a trance happening, there's a mantra that's being repeated over and over again. And so she's like in the zone of being brainwashed. So we don't know what's real. I don't know what actually happened with Lila and her sister. I don't know. I have some ideas. I have some of the murkiness, Avery, to your, I have some of that, but I don't really know because Evelyn has got an agenda, Bobbi, like you were talking about earlier, and is coming in and is doing this for to control her, really, to take her in, to, bring her to a place of leaping for her own gain so she can continue the cult. I mean, it's all in service to this murderous cult, you know? And so there isn't really, in my opinion, there's no actual healing here. It's like it's the game where everyone's yelling at each other and you think there's catharsis because someone's sort of breaking down and crying, but that's not healing. That's just further fragmenting psyche, putting people against each other and making Evelyn the mother in charge, the only mother that can be, except for Laura, who's now, going like, mm-hmm. What I would do differently is every single thing. But I think that's what's happening here.
I feel like this is an excellent example of trauma bonding, where the
Mm.
abuser is, I mean, in this case, Evelyn is consciously doing it. It's a strategy, and it's also who she is. And the trauma bond being, this is often misconceived by a lot of people, where the trauma bond is about going through trauma and it bonds you together. But really, the trauma bond is this very parasitic kind of, I'm going to abuse you and make you hurt so deeply and be so traumatized. And then I'm going to offer you the reprieve, the relief from your suffering. So then you become attached to me. So Evelyn manipulates Lila to the point where she is reimagining reality and blaming herself. I killed my sister. I pushed her into the pool. I didn't help her. I watched her die. We have a pretty good sense that that is not how it actually went, but that was what Evelyn was pushing her to get to. And then once she got said it in a way and remembered it in the way Evelyn wanted her to, then comes the relief. You always hated your sister because she got your mother's attention, and you were desperate for your mother's attention, and you're crying out, and your mother is not responding to you because she loves Jess more than you, and Jess has always been the favorite, and you're crying out for your mother, and then Evelyn saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. So Lila like breaking her down and becoming totally reliant, finding the thing that she wants and craves more than anything else, which is the troubled teen, right? The mother wound, like you all
The
have
mother
said.
wound.
Here
Ugh.
it is.
It's so huge. When you were talking about this earlier, I was like, we're all crying out for our mother. Like, who isn't crying out for their mother? That's such an easy place to hit any human being, pretty much. Like, you're crying out for your mother and her back is turned. Horror, horror, deep, visceral body pain. Like, that's such a painful place to tap in somebody. And it's true, like these kinds of constructs, they're very like psychodynamic, unconsciousy kinds of constructs. You hate your sister because she gets the attention of your mother, and all of that stuff can be under the surface for somebody and it feels terrible, but it's also like not what drives most of our actions. Like many of us may harbor like some of these deeper kind of shadowy feelings but not be completely driven by them, but they can be exploited, they can be manipulated. If somebody finds it and can like tease that up for you, it's very powerful to hold that mirror into somebody to say, these are the ugly things in your psyche, these are the dark parts of you. And God, that's just the way she weaponizes it for her own gain is so, I mean, truly masterful. This is like masterful brainwashing, but horrifically bad.
Wonderful writing. I really love how they're doing these flashbacks and putting her in, and it's got this very eerie quality, but it's like I think it's like very well crafted. And it turns out if she did murder her sister, then she can murder other people. Then she can actually be part of the cult. So everyone wins. No, no one wins. It's
No,
horrible.
Evelyn wins only.
Evelyn wins. And there's that parallel with Laura of did Laura kill her parents? We've got flashes of that here. We don't know. It's ambiguous. But if she believes, and she says something to, I don't remember what she said, what Evelyn says at the end, but she's comforting her when it's clear that they've died, that the car, she goes underwater to see the car of where her parents were. But if Laura possibly killed her parents, if that was implanted in her in some way, we don't know again. And I like that we don't know. I really like, again, the writing
Mhm.
that's like putting
Mhm.
us on the journey of like, oh, what happened? Did they do that? Let me investigate that. We're kind of on Alex's journey. We're on the, Agent Coop's kind of like hero's
Mhm.
journey, and it's so flawed
Mhm.
and wonderful. But if she did, or believes, a part of her believes that she might have, then she fits into this murderous cult. And it really is
Mhm.
about breaking people apart. And if you're not in service of the cult, then you have to go. Like
Mhm.
Daniel.
Yeah, like Daniel.
Oh God, Daniel.
Oh, Daniel.
Daniel,
Daniel.
oh my
Just and like
Oh,
Avery Stacy. I mean, I just kept thinking about like
oh my
back to like
God, Stacy.
all of your thoughts on Stacy and like,
Stacey, man,
oh
that
God.
this is scariest. I mean, she's like young Evelyn. Like, there's such a
Mhm.
through line in their
Mhm.
archetypes, but Stacey is like most modern things, maybe just like a little sharper, and a little more intense and feral. And yeah, Stacey creeps me out to no end. But yeah, I mean, Evelyn in this episode, I think the thing that I saw watching it through again too about this particular thing of murdering is in one way or another, she makes you a murderer. Whether she makes you believe you have murdered or she makes you actually physically murder, that does seem like part of what fuels their whole community trauma bond is like,
Yes.
yeah, believing you have killed or actually killing, but finding that capacity in you of being a killer, which is a wild foundation for a little society. Question mark, Evelyn, what are you doing?
Yeah, I really struggled to watch that scene again. I felt myself wanting to fast forward through it or something, and I made myself watch the sequence between Stacy and Daniel. And we had finally gotten to see the soft, caring, loving part of Daniel, who's like helping out Abby and Rory and, a little bit about his story. And then the next time we see him is Stacy creeping up and Daniel mirroring back in this honest way of like, they broke you, this leap like broke you. And they did, they break you down. That's what they do to get control, right? Stacy is so desperate to belong and to be loved and to be good. Her whole psyche is based on that, on belonging to the Tall Pines family. And so this really intimate moment after she stabs Daniel and she's holding him and he wraps his arm around her back and he dies in her arms. And while, like, as that moment's happening, Rabbit is walking into the scene, and I completely forgot that Rabbit was a part of that. And Stacy smiles like she's like in the intensity and the intimacy of like having just taken Daniel's life. And then Rabbit comes and holds her. And Stacy has this little smile on her face for a moment after Daniel's dead. And then what do at the end of the episode? Totally lie. Like they cover it up for Stacy. And so that ensures that Stacy will never and can never leave the cult. But it's also
Absolutely.
this initiation, like you were just saying. Is an initiation or your status in the cult based on you killing someone?
The violence
Uh,
I was saying earlier, just like this episode is so violent. There's like the psychic mental violence that Evelyn is doing to Lila in the beginning, and then this whole outdoor enterprise is so violent. Abby's transformation, has come to this point where the sweet, sweet girl that Abby was is now this person who can just literally leave somebody behind under a rock with massive injury. That part was hard for me to look at. Like, oh, that girl was a shitty person for sure, but like everybody in there, this is just it's like a tank of piranhas or something, they've just the way that violence is kind of this a currency that's flowing through everybody into everybody in this cult has gotten to Abby by this episode, and that was heartbreaking to see too. Just like how she could dehumanize this other person.
Abby, actually, I have the quote that she says when Rory says people have to help each other. Even Daniel helped us. And then Abby says, I can't keep taking care of everyone else all the time, and it never makes anything better. Everything just still fucking sucks. So now I just have to think about myself first. And there's the tragedy, like the heartbreak of seeing someone who has been sensitive and loving and dedicated to her deep friendship with Lila, but then Lila has betrayed her and abandoned her many times. And there's a quote in there about this is all my best friend's fucking fault. The whole reason that she's in Tall Pines and that and then where is Lila? And Lila keeps abandoning her. So Abby is exploring what it's like to be the villain and to not take care of other people and to not give a shit. But it doesn't work because the end, she does save Rory.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness she goes back for Rory. That is one of the rare moments of redemption and hope in this episode. Thank goodness that she found her that part of herself mirrored through Rory. There's some real mirroring of Abby's sweetness in Rory and in their relationship in this episode as well.
Yeah, it's like he's her conscience that's like following behind her,
Yeah.
being like, wait, what? We're not going to help this person? Wait, we're going to leave Marty behind because he's slowing us down? Like, Abby, what are you doing? And then Rory in the end is like having an asthma attack and says, Abby, go, sacrificing himself. And like in that moment, we think, oh, he's going to die. And Abby's like, I'm sorry, I'll come back for you. But in fact, she can't do it because that's not who she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the mirror of this is who you really are. Remember who you are. These people are trying
Mm-hmm.
to make you someone else, but you're not. You're not going to be that person, even if a part of her does. And when she said that quote, Bobbi, that you just read, there was a part of me that's like not in the sense of yeah, forget that person who's dying on the has got this big wound and good, but this idea of like, what about thinking for yourself, Abby, and what you want and need? I love that. Like conceptually, conceptually, in addition to, of course, you're thinking about the collective and the community and everything else. But I do feel like a lot of her identity was just all wrapped up in Lila. And that Lila, like, the parallels between Lila and Jess and Lila and Abby, Lila's like, let's break into the school and do mushrooms and, photocopy some shit. And like, what? And Jess is like, let's break into your place of employment and cause a big fucking huge crazy party and destroy property and, just get into horrible situations. And so who is Lila without who is Lila not in relationship to Jess in some way? And then who is Abby not in relationship to Lila in some way? And these are the kind of parallels, like who are they? These identity questions. There's so much heartbreak for me in this episode, but the biggest heartbreak is watching what they do, how they destroy this beautiful restaurant. It's like it's archetypally some sort of like house or home or hearth. It's a family run place. It's just this stamp of extreme disrespect and disregard over not only the place and what they've built, but over Lila's new job. She's got a new job and she wants to keep her job. And she has no boundaries with her sister. And her sister is out of control and she's trying to fit in. And also, I'm just going to say one more thing on this topic. The first actual mirror that we see in the show is when they're on their way to the restaurant and it's the rear view mirror in the car. And we see, first of all, the troll doll hanging from the rearview mirror. Shout out to troll dolls, had a lot of them. And then we see in the rearview mirror that her
The
sister's friend.
the crushy girl.
Yes, the
So
crushy
cute. What
girl.
a cutie.
She's so cute.
I would 100% have been Delilah flirting with that girl. It's
We see her
yeah,
fishnets. We see her
yeah.
fishnets and sort of her
Hmm.
making eyes. And that was such a beautiful callback. And, I love the nostalgic callbacks in the show. And the troll doll and the fishnets were one of them. And it took me to a memory of, some like being in early middle school and hanging out and like wearing fishnets and like making out with girls who also wore fishnets and the fishnets in and of themselves kind of representing like scandal and like nefarious shit that we weren't supposed to be doing. Also, I was probably doing drugs in addition to making out with girls. So it was all kind of like wrapped up in basically I was at that party at the restaurant. I was 12, is what we're saying. That longing that we see, it's such great acting, it's such good writing. That longing that we see, those glimpses, those glances, even though it doesn't turn out in any type of fabulous way. I think it's another kind of lift up part of the episode for me is like, oh yeah, I love seeing like it makes it kind of tingly to see that crushy stuff.
Another quick shout out to the era. They're playing in one of the scenes where what is this crushy girl's name? They're playing a tricky song that I loved so much called She Makes Me Want to Die. Such a beautiful song. I mean, it's and so powerful. And I was thinking about that in the context of this scene and like I think in some ways Jess is like really attacking Lila's life here, like attacking her job and also like her mother's affection and approval, and just like this thing of the party at the restaurant is such an attack on Lila. Because it's a show and not a real person, I can say it's interesting that Jess dies at the end of this scene after that song is playing, because there's an attack on life that's happening that goes wrong in both directions, both like Jess attacking Lila's livelihood, and then Lila ending up feeling ultimately responsible for Jess's death, even though Jess is the older one. Jess is dealing out the drugs. Jess has all the bad ideas. There's such an attack on Lila's life that comes out of it, even because Jess dies, even more so. That this is like such, it's such a big, big chunk of damage for Lila. All of it, 100% of it. Even if Jess had not died, that was going to be very bad for her. Everything that happened there.
Yeah, and just to add that gets conflated with her crush and her sense of like early sexuality. Like it's all conflated in there. Her sister's death in that. So what are the kind of, yeah, psychic impacts of that as she continues on? I mean, and we see some positive things that, like ways in which she's comfortable with herself, but also just all of the combined traumatic elements of that night.
The friend's name was Ashley, and I
Thank
bring
you.
that forward because that is such a name of that era too. It's
Oh my God,
like
totally.
Ashley.
Yes.
The unattainable like Aphrodite on the pedestal that is Ashley of the 90s with
Yes.
the joint in her mouth and
Oh,
the hot fishnets, seeing you looking at her and taunting you.
yeah.
I just saw this quote that I had written down about, I can't remember the Tall Pines security guard, whatever his name is, that's like the one that is talking to them and shaming them once they get off the bus, like before they are handed their
Oh,
backpacks and they don't really
uh,
know what's going on. And he has this kind of diatribe on like your revolt had so much potential and you really fucked it up. And this quote of, and this is early on in the beginning of the episode, you need to learn what you're made of. So then the mirror comes back, but it's this funhouse mirror. It's this warped mirror of, and we're seeing all of these pieces of the shamed parts and the grotesque parts of us, the jealous parts and the superficial parts, or the cruel parts, or the parts that can murder and kill, and how all of these different, I mean, in particular, the experience of the teens having to hike 50 miles through the wilderness with minimal supplies, and then this experience that Lila's having with Evelyn, and that Lila was the instigator of this revolt, but she's not going to this wilderness journey. She's with Evelyn because she's at that critical point of vulnerability where Evelyn can get in there. And then she's also differentiating Lila from the rest of her peers, and the bitterness that they feel that Lila is the one that instigated it, and then she's not being punished the way they are. She's getting rewarded by this time with Evelyn, and ultimately getting Evelyn's mother approval or love.
Yeah, that's such a classic divide and conquer kind of split people up technique that I think the prior episode, they do this, Abby and Lila in the hot seat, kind of a rabbit is in there kind of trying to drive wedges between the two of them. And this, is kind of a next level way to split the two of them apart, but also to, yeah, kind of split Lila off from others in a very strategic way. This whole thing of like finding out who you really are in these intense scenarios too is just like so. I see you and you look like you're gonna throw up, and that's how it makes me feel too, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it is so much a part of the task of teenhood to define an identity, and it's so hard because, like I was saying earlier, like so much is murky. And I think for teens in particular, like you try on a few identities and you don't know, and you often feel like you're faking it till you make it, and there can be so much pressure on teens to know who they are. And I see this in both the thing that Evelyn's doing and this wilderness training, especially after what you just said, Bobbi, just this thing of like, find out who you really are. Is who I really am this is the version of myself who's out in survival territory with very little supplies? Not really. Like, that's the animal, most basic mammal parts of me are going to come out then. But this quest for like who I really am is again just like this kind of sacred, very murky territory for teens that I think we can, as therapists, hold people through. But it's so tender and precarious to be a teen trying to find an identity and having people all around you telling you who you really are or what circumstances are going to make you who you really are is just such a detriment to that process, really. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and I think as
yeah.
adults too, like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like I can't those like okay, yeah, whatever. Like Tony Robbins stuff. Like these things are like find out who you really are. Go away to this weekend and, strip down to this thing and you'll find out your true self or whatever. And it's like there's something inherently like disgustingly like individualistic and white supremacist about that whole thing. It's like what there's something yeah, very much like it's on you to do that, and here's the way you're going to do that because we've prescribed and written this formula of how that works.
I haven't really seen anything like this in a while. I remember Girl Interrupted from a kind of like our younger days as a place where you could see more of kind of like the harms of institutions like this on young people. But I am hopeful that there'll be a moment of kind of reckoning with current practices that are out there happening, that, that the popularity of this show will draw attention to how vulnerable. I mean, kids are already, for all intents and purposes, an oppressed population because they have so little agency and so little control over their own lives. And places like this just double, triple, quadruple down on that, taking more and more agency, autonomy away from kids. And it's really, really harmful. I'm sure there are people all over the place watching this show who are resonating with the harm caused,
Mhm.
even if it's, maybe not as culty and maybe there were no toads or psychedelics, but the harms that are here are so real.
Mhm. There is one more thing I wanted to mention. I'm sorry, it's about a murder, but I did just want to call out the murder of Maurice, the character Maurice, who quote unquote, dies by suicide. Dwayne kills him, essentially. I just love Mark McKinney. So that's why I'm bringing him up. I mean, obviously, it's a horrible murder and it falls in line with the cult murder that we're seeing in this episode, particularly. But Mark McKinney was from Kids in the Hall. I just love him so much. And I know he also wrote for SNL for a while. And I'm just like a huge fan of Kids in the Hall. I've seen them live lots of times. And I just want to shout out to Mark McKinney and that his character is so great, even though we only meet him and see him briefly. Shout out Mark McKinney. Thank you for being in this. Thank you for bringing some a little bit of a moment of like, it's Mark McKinney in a very heavy episode.
Yeah, I was just looking at that piece too because it was such a minor part of this episode, but it's so significant to the larger story arc. And where there's this little blip of Alex finding the Ponderosa holdings and the story of the murder that happened in the house that he and Laura live in. And then when Dwayne walks in and Alex quickly shuts down the Google search, shout out to Google in the 90s, early 2000s. um, it was so funny to like the technology that we see, like, oh, wow, yep. Dwayne says, "You must have been real mad. I'm getting real sick of cleaning up your mess. Evelyn wants this to work. You and Laura belong here. And Tall Pines is a very forgiving place. This could all go away, or it could not." And he's referencing the person who is because it's out of district, it's a different county, but the person who does the fingerprint stuff, the lab tech over there is a graduate of Tall Pines as part of the cult, as cults do, gather the dirt and basically put you in this impossible bind. You either go along with this and you get to belong and you have all of this wonderful, or you are going to jail. Like your whole life is going to be ruined. And so, what kind of choice is that?
For Alex, this is like such a heart-sinking moment. I imagine, like both to see like, oh, that guy's dead now. I got, I got that guy killed. And also, once again, like his stuff is complicit in here. He does, really go off on this guy and lose his temper again. And this is, like we were saying earlier, like what Evelyn does is just to like get those parts of you that feel bad, like feel like a bad person, and to keep that mirror in front of you all the time. Like, you're so bad. You need us so much. We are cleaning up after your mess, and it's so monstrous. I really feel for Alex in this scene. And then as he goes home to Laura and their house is bugged, and it's just layers of terror piling on layers of terror. And again, back to what I was saying in our last recording of episode 4, like there is this way that the baby specifically is like really holding Alex down. Like it's like he says to Laura, you got to promise me we'll leave before the baby. And she doesn't say anything for a minute, and then she's like, I won't let anything happen to the baby, but like the baby becomes kind of like the big tether that Alex can't leave behind.
And we can feel, I mean, may there be a season 2, right? And 3 and 4 and whatever, but please may there be, because there's just these really big uh, question marks left hanging of, I mean, don't want to jump ahead to the final episodes, but just that the Laura talks about the baby. She doesn't claim the baby as her own, or her and Alex as our baby or my baby. It's the baby. It's the baby for the collective cult. And that is the edge that I think she knows she will have in order to gain the power of cult leader, to oust Evelyn and to become. So she is the mother. She becomes the mother of the community through being the only one who can actually bring new life and a baby to all of these people who have agreed to not have children because that was the dictation of Evelyn.
Yeah, she's having the baby that Evelyn wasn't able to have because her parents made that not happen. So that's not going to work out.
Yeah. But that's really profound to think about, like just how many connections, and just that thing of like things that repeat and cycles that come back and move forward and heal in different ways. That is so true. Evelyn's baby got taken, and Laura gets to have the baby.
I'm thinking something too earlier, Bobbi, when you were talking about trauma bonding and the way you described it so beautifully. I was thinking about mirroring and narcissism. And I was thinking about how, like, I wonder, this isn't fully formed, but I wonder if all of the orchestrated murders and the way that the cult develops people into murderers is a mirror for Evelyn because of her own starting the murder. Like she needs to see it externalized as well because she is the one who began that. So she started it and she needs to keep seeing it, that power, that ability to remove something that's not serving her and the cult, but the need to see it in others, not just herself. Like, because she's not the one going around and doing all the business. Charlie Manson shot one person, but he didn't kill anybody, really. It was all the drug
Yeah.
deal part. But then, the Tate LaBianca murders, he did nothing. He just told them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of that earlier when I was talking about how she has to make everyone into a murderer. It's almost like she's trying to reconcile how she could do that by making other people do that, and kind of like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
continuing to maybe reify and kind of affirmed for herself that what she did was the right thing to do by
Mm-hmm.
having other people do it over and over and over again. That's what it means to belong, and that's what it
Mm-hmm.
means to create a really strong community, is you need to be able to kill for it. And she obviously made that decision herself as a young person, and then yeah, has built so much. I know we're almost out of time for today. I want to say what you just said too, Em, made me think of scapegoating as a phenomenon in group dynamics. Just that, like, scapegoating, I know as a group facilitator, like, it just leads to more scapegoating. You think you've kicked out the person who doesn't belong, but then, whatever got projected onto that person just gets redistributed in the group. And so there's this way that the allegory of murder here, maybe I can also think of as about scapegoating, about how we keep trying to, like, drive out the shadow or murder the thing, whatever the thing we don't want in our group is, we keep trying to kill it. But that process is never ending. And no one feels like they belong in an environment of scapegoating. Everybody's going to feel eventually like they are the one who's next. And that just creates such a climate of fear and othering and finger pointing. And that's so much of what Evelyn has created. And I mean, such a societal mirror. Speaking of mirroring, that's a societal
Totally.
mirror, because that's what we do all the
That's
time with oppression and just
that's
like
what's happening
whatever.
all the time right
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
all the time right now.
Yeah,
That's so good, Avery. Mic drop.
really good.
Love
Yep,
that.
mic drop.
Oh, I love you all. I love you both.
Love
It's
you.
so great to see you both today and talk about this really depressing shit.
It really was. It actually, I mean, and just
Oh,
there's so much hopefulness in our conversation and also in the work that both of you are doing. And Bobbi, hearing what you're working with, especially with teens, is really like outstanding. Thank you so much. Bobbi, where can people find you and connect with you? Or slash, are you taking new clients? Like, tell us the things.
Even if my private practice is full, I love to share resources and I love to connect people with the resources I know of in the community, and to really help us all feel like we are in this together and that we're cared for and we have a place of belonging that is not a cult. And people can find me at bobbirosemft.com, and that has all of my info on it, and it's a simple website. But yeah, I love to connect with people, and I also want to put a little blurb out there for Positive Images, which is our local queer center, and they do amazing work, and they're a really wonderful, safe place for families, for teens, for transgender expansive folks, for immigrants, for all of our marginalized community members. And then I'm also on the board of an amazing organization called On the Margins, which is dedicated to healing justice, and our whole motivation and foundation is built on Till We're All Free. It's about all of us and the collective human family and understanding our interconnectedness. And there's a lot of different really cool programs that are done there. There's Nepantla, which is a bilingual, multicultural online gathering for therapists. And they have all kinds of amazing content that happens monthly through that program. And then one that I wanted to share, which is for QT BIPOC folks in our community. There's actually a free therapy program that is
Oh,
for
cool.
and by QT BIPOC therapists. So the therapists that are
Amazing.
serving are also QT BIPOC, and they are providing therapy for QT BIPOC clients, and free therapy in particular. And I think it's 12 sessions
It's
that they can
amazing.
get free. So you can reach out to PI. You can also look up On the Margins, and on their website, there's a place where you can sign up
That's
as a
fabulous.
client.
And I'll link all that in our show notes too, so folks can access those websites and those programs, which sounds amazing. And talk about mirroring, right? Like having QT BIPOC folks, anyway, it's all there. Healthy mirroring, beautiful
Mhm.
mirroring,
Mhm.
beautiful
transformative healing
mirroring.
mirroring. And and listeners, if you want to, give us a 5-star review. Shout out a little nice message about our pod because we're cute and amazing. And we're talking about
Uh-huh.
Wayward, damn it. And you love Wayward just like
Yeah.
us. And
Yep.
so give us some kind words, prop us up a little bit.
Share with your
we would love that.
friends.
Yeah, share with your friends. Share with your friends. Share it on your socials. And we're on all the things, you know, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, all the things. So you can find us there. And Bobbi, thank you again for everything. This was awesome. You rock.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
This has been fantastic. Thank you all so much. Deeply honored and so grateful to be connected to you both.